Hello, I'm Doug, and welcome to the Krewe of Japan podcast, a weekly podcast where we take you on audio journeys through Japanese culture. Welcome back to the podcast. Today is going to be a special episode where we connect our home of New Orleans, Louisiana, to the country we always talk about in Japan. Jen and I briefly take a moment to reflect on our own experiences with New Orleans food outside of New Orleans, specifically in Japan. Afterwards, then we sit down for a chat with CC Haydel, owner of Bistro New Orleans in Osaka. CC Haydel is a New Orleans native, born and raised, who relocated to Japan. During our discussion, he shares a wide variety of stories about how he came to open up his own restaurant.
I did what at the time I called them tasting parties. So I had friends that had restaurants and bars, and I would go and make a few things and sell them just to see what the reaction was.
The difference between Cajun and Creole.
You know, Cajun food is more rustic, mostly one pot kind of meals, where Creole food tends to be more urbane.
The reactions to his food he gets from his customers.
People are surprised at the complexity and the uniqueness of it all. They're like, well, I've never had anything like this. But, you know, most Americans that come here, most Westerners that come here are even, surprised. I lived all over the States and people were like, I don't understand this food.
And so much more. Whether you are from New Orleans and are familiar with the cuisine, or maybe you're someone who's never tasted a Cajun or Creole dish ever before in your life, this episode is for all audiences. Not to mention, and it won't take you long to pick up on it, CC is downright hilarious. Wherever you are, and whatever time it is, I hope you ate breakfast, lunch, or dinner, because this episode is about to make you very hungry. Let's go. Today, we are talking about Japanese representations of New Orleans food.
Yum,
and
yum.
Oh yeah. So I think one thing that I've personally not really run into a lot of New Orleans food in Japan. You know, obviously you see some things, like everyone knows that there's a cafe, maybe not everyone knows, but there's a few Cafe du Mondes out there.
Yeah. I remember back in the day when I studied abroad in 2010, there was a Cafe du Monde in Kyoto Station.
Yep.
And then 4 years later, it was gone.
And there's one in Osaka, and what they have on the menu there, they have beignets and they have the coffee.
Yeah.
But they had hot dogs and stuff too. That was just it's it's an American restaurant. Here's American food to throw onto that American dog. But yeah, outside of Cafe du Monde, you don't really see a lot in Japan. I know in my town where I used to live in Iwaki, there was a restaurant called Louisiana, I think, where a guy who runs the restaurant is, he studied in New Orleans for a week.
Mm-hmm.
I learned, or maybe a few weeks, and then came back to Japan and used what he learned to set up his own New Orleans style restaurant. There's a gumbo shop in Matsue City that is called Green's Baby. Really good.
But that makes sense, though, since they're our sister city.
Yeah, exactly. But again, in general, it's hard to find it.
It is.
It's not like you go to and find a French restaurant here or a Spanish restaurant or
Italian restaurants everywhere.
Right.
Oh my god.
Oh, everywhere. But I think the big part of that is the characteristics of New Orleans food. Some of those spices and ingredients are just harder to come by.
Harder to come by, and then I feel like it could possibly be something where it's not to Japanese taste standards, I guess.
Yeah,
is what
it's different.
I'm thinking of too.
Yeah. It's just different in terms of the seasonings that are used. It's a different type of spicy. I think there's different ideas of spiciness. New Orleans food, I really don't know how to explain it because there's just some seasonings that are used that are unique to Cajun and Creole food.
Yeah.
And you can only get that seasoning. I mean, obviously you could buy it in international stores. Sometimes they have it, or you can import it from New Orleans to wherever you are, but it's not as readily available internationally.
Yeah.
And even some of the dishes, a big one that comes to mind is crawfish. Crawfish in Japan is a plaything for kids.
Yeah, it's not something you eat.
they live in mud, they're considered dirty, but here it's a delicacy. We crawfish boils all the time.
Yeah.
It's a big part of New Orleans culture. You plan things around crawfish season.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like, those are two kind of specific examples, but I mean, also just the cost of ingredients. We use a lot of bell peppers, for example.
Yeah.
And bell peppers in New Orleans or in the US are pretty large, but anyone that's lived in Japan knows that bell peppers you get in Japan are very tiny. And they're expensive. So I think what you would need to get volume wise and cost is different. So just, it's hard to recreate some of those dishes.
And I find we're specifically talking about Japan in this episode, but I want people to know that I've been to other places around the US, and even in those places, they can't do New Orleans food right, and they have all the supplies here that they could need.
Yeah. It's it's not like New Orleans, oh, we're New Orleans, we can only do it, you can't. It's not like that.
Yeah, no, we're not trying to say that, but
but it's just really hard to recreate unless you really have studied the cuisine. And I mean, I think there's a lot of people that travel to New Orleans and study under these professional chefs and restaurant owners to learn their skill and their craft and the recipes and how to make those combinations of food and ingredients to make those very unique New Orleans-esque dishes.
Yeah, I mean, I know typically I try not to be a snoot about it, but if I find a New Orleans restaurant anywhere but in New Orleans, I'm always hesitant to try it because I'm I don't know. I don't want to be disappointed, and I don't want to be that person.
In those two restaurants that I went to, the one in Iwaki, which was actually really good. The food was great, and even in also in Matsue, the Green's Baby, the gumbo there, they use okra, which is one of the things I want to say in Matsue. There's a prevalent supply of okra in that area. And okra is a big ingredient in gumbo. It gives it kind of that I don't want to say gooey, but it gives it a little bit of texture that if you don't have okra,
Japan loves texture.
Oh yeah. So those places when I've eaten there, I was like, man, this is actually really good. This is a very close representation to what I've had. But like you said, in the States, I feel like people just say, hey, here's some jambalaya, or here's some dirty rice, and you look at it and you're like, wait, this is the wrong color.
Yeah, wrong color, wrong everything.
Yeah,
you even see those videos on Facebook where they're like, oh, let's make gumbo, and then they're like, can of tomatoes. I'm like, what are you doing?
Like the crawfish boil videos where they do something, you're like, what the hell are you doing there? Oh my god.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you see a can of Old Bay come in, you're like, what are you about to do with that?
Yeah it's hilarious. And I think watching some of those things are hilarious, but then also watching the reactions of New Orleans people watching those things.
Oh yeah, no, that's even better.
Equally hilarious, because they're just like, oh my god, because anyone who does a crawfish boil probably considers themselves a crawfish pro or something. They all, but there's no one way to do it.
No, there's not. You can really mix it up. I know my brother-in-law, he uses a bunch of oranges and stuff in his crawfish boil. I mean, it's really hard to mess it up, honestly.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, we're going on a crawfish tangent here, but that's a big part of New Orleans cuisine.
It is.
So we're going to talk about that today in our interview with CC. CC mentions that, among a lot of other things, giving us some insight into owning a restaurant in Japan, specifically a New Orleans style Cajun-Creole cuisine restaurant. So I think everyone's really going to enjoy it, especially if you're kind of a foodie and want to learn more about Louisiana food options and New Orleans food options. Then this interview is definitely going to be for you. So let's just jump into the interview. All right, and we're back. Today I have with us Jenn. Hey, Jenn, how you doing?
Hey, Doug.
And our special guest for the day, we have CC Haydel, who is the owner and head chef of Bistro New Orleans in Osaka. It's a Cajun-Creole restaurant down there. So we wanted to, this season on the podcast, we really wanted to start really tapping into the connections that bring not just America and Japan together, but New Orleans and Japan. And this is something we just kind of happened to stumble across, really. It was crazy. But, the first question a lot of times we ask our guests is, what is their connection to New Orleans? But obviously your connection is that you're from here.
Right.
So,
Right. Yes.
So, being New Orleans born,
Mm-hmm.
what is something that you think of and say, that's so New Orleans? We're going to change it up a little bit for our listeners.
Well, it's funny because on the wall right here next to me it's a big red wall, and the only thing that I have on the wall is saying it says "Laissez le bon temps rouler," but that's kind of like people ask about it, and I say, well, the reason I like it because it's New Orleans is because the words are French, but the grammar is English. So
Yeah.
I was an English teacher in America, so people are because French people see it and they're like, I don't understand. I'm like, no, don't put it in French order. Right. It literally is let the good times roll. But a lot of my patrons and regulars and people who come here, they understand, yeah, you're right. And my
Yeah, you're
employee,
right.
yeah, you're right. Yeah. And yeah, even my employees are like, oh, most of them are Western, and they see that kind of a thing, and they start to understand the energy.
Yeah.
Because I do
Definitely.
have New Orleans people here that come to visit, and I lived all over the States. And I realized people said, well, how did you know how to make this kind of food? And I said, well, if you want good New Orleans food, then you got to make it. If you're not in
Yeah.
New Orleans, like, yeah, I lived in New York. All I did was get angry. Let's see,
Start
we go
judging
to
it,
this
right?
restaurant. We want to go to this restaurant, and the food even might be good, but it's not the same.
You're like, yeah, you start nitpicking it.
Oh,
You're like, this isn't
it's
the right
not
ingredient. It
even
doesn't taste right.
nitpicking. Sometimes I'm like, this is just not right. Right? You'd be shocked. It's just like,
Oh, I can
no.
imagine seasoning being off, and oh god.
Oh, it's not even like. And yeah, as soon as they start explaining, like, so gumbo is, I'm like, because I never tell them I'm from New Orleans when I used to go there. Because, I'm trying to be respectful, but no.
You're like a mystery shopper.
Yeah, exactly. I was just like, this is just not right. And I'd make it at home, and people would be like, how do you know how to do this? And I go, because I know what it's supposed to taste like. So,
Yeah.
right. So even here, it's like that. I know what it's supposed to taste like. So, although I will say this, it's shocking that I'm opening with this, but you all know Taka vodka,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the worst vodka in the world. Literally, it just I don't care what people in New Orleans say. It's almost like the balance. New Orleans foods and drinks are so great. So what's the balance? Taka, awful, terrible, and we drink it on purpose. But right. But
Yeah.
I can get it here. It's embarrassing. It's still in the plastic bottle. It's up on my shelf over there.
It's kind of really
I
accessible,
thought it was
right?
crazy. I was just in a Japanese liquor store, and I'm like, Taka, really? I lived in New York. I couldn't find Taka. Not that I was trying, but right.
It came to Japan to haunt you.
Oh, I did. It's insane. People are like, how much for this? I'm like, I'm not charging you. I have my dignity. Right. So, right. And so somebody drank it once and they said, well, did I just drink a magic marker? I went, well, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's that bad. And I'm shocked that I can find it here. Right.
Yeah.
Where I lived all over the United States. I lived in Los Angeles. I lived in New York. I lived in Charlotte. No, none of that. But here. Like, really? Taka? Really?
Well, that's interesting that you say that you've lived all over, because my question for you is kind of like, how did you get to Japan? Like, why Japan? How did that all start for you? Because, like, you saying you went from, like, your traveled the States, but, like,
Right.
all the way to Japan?
I know. Did not expect it. So
Really? So it wasn't expected?
Not at all. So I met my wife, who's Japanese, in New York at a bar.
The way New Orleans does.
Right. And apparently, here drinking in Japan, they drink like New Orleans. So there's no last call or any of that.
Yep.
So I was at a bar in New York, my regular place, and she came in and we just kind of sort of did this thing. And then pretty soon she said, well, I'm going back to Japan. I'm a lawyer there and I'm a partner in a firm and I'm going to go back. And I wasn't happy with my job at the time, teaching English at this particular place. It was stressful. And so I came here to teach English. But then I'm overqualified here to teach English. So I have a master's degree in English education. So they didn't know what to do with that. I'm like, I know how to teach English. And it was weird. So
you're not teaching actual proper English when you come to Japan sometimes. You're just teaching.
Right. Yeah.
I taught JET. I did the JET.
Oh, you were a JET?
So I taught
okay,
for 3 years. So I get it.
Right. Like, are you kidding me? They're like, do you know how to teach English? I'm like, yes. Really, really good. Right. But so it was weird. And even my wife got a little frustrated too. I mean, she's a professional. So then I kind of said, well, maybe I should do these things. And I did what at the time I called them tasting parties. So I had friends that had restaurants and bars and I would go and make a few things and sell them just to see what the reaction was. And of course, everybody went, well, I don't understand this food, but it's really good. Because nobody understands the food. They don't know how to make sense of it at all.
It's very different.
It's really, it's more unique than, I loved New York City. I loved all the different things I could have. I could go to an Ethiopian restaurant. There was one across the street from my dorm. And it was just all crazy, delicious, unique. But finding New Orleans food was almost impossible.
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
And even more so in Japan, right?
Yes.
It's,
it's fine. You got that right. Woo. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you're right. So I'm just curious, how old were you when you decided to move over to Japan?
I guess I was in my late 40s.
Okay.
Yeah. I hadn't made 50 yet because I've been here since 2009. Yeah, my New York friends, because, they're jerks. But I love them, but they're like, I came here and the Saints won the Super Bowl.
I was in Japan when they won too.
Oh, you too?
I was here 2007 and 2010.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I actually, that season, I was in Japan for the first 13 games when they were on a winning streak, and I went home and they lost the last 3 while I was home.
Ooh,
and they were like, get the hell out of here.
Right.
Get the hell out of here for the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. In fact, it was when they won the Super Bowl, I remember, because it's even from New Orleans, it's just a feat. I got drunk twice in the same day. So the game was in the morning, and I got drunk, and they won the game, and then it was noon. So I went home, and I went to bed, and then I got up at 6 p.m., and I went out, and I got drunk again. It's crazy, right? Yeah. Yeah, my liver said, don't do that ever again, please. Don't do that ever. Right.
So I got a question, because it's really cool that you did go that path of, English teacher at first, and then doing these tastings, and then eventually getting into, opening your own restaurant.
Right.
But, did you ever see yourself? New Orleans is like a huge hospitality city.
Yes.
Like, it's known for its hospitality, and to some extent, I think Osaka is kind of seen as a foodie scene too.
Yes.
Did you ever foresee yourself getting into hospitality as you were growing up?
Well, being a native, when I was younger, the drinking age was 18. So, you could work. So I was a waiter and even a bartender up until, through college. So it wasn't a difficult decision. I knew how to be a host. My parents had parties. Their friends had parties. New Orleans society, and right. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't difficult to be a good host for me, and understanding how the food worked because I lived away. I had more or less kind of figured that out. I just hadn't figured it out in this kind of restaurant setting, maybe.
Yeah.
But it wasn't difficult for me to Hospitality was that part was easy.
Okay. So when you started doing your tastings,
Mm-hmm.
you started doing that, and then you obviously noticed something clicked.
Yes.
Right. You noticed people were really into it, really feeling it.
Right.
Is that when you were kind of like, all right, I think I have something here.
Yeah,
I
it's
need to run with
doable.
it.
Yeah, it's doable.
Yeah.
One of my good friends here, he's half Indian, half Dutch. Although when you look at him, you just see Indian. And he's a professional chef, cordon bleu, yada, yada, yada. And he tasted the food and he was like, wow. Because his first love is Spanish food, which reminds me a lot of the New Orleans kind of style. Because there's more Spanish Creole than people think. Because I think shrimp Creole is probably Spanish Creole. People think it's French. I'm like, no, I don't think so. But he helped me understand how to run restaurants and whatever. And then because of him, this is why I'm pretty viable now. Because he was like, yeah, this kind of food could make it if people catch on.
Yeah.
Being Japan, they're normally conservative, but Osaka was the place to do it. I mean, there's a place in Tokyo, the Soul Food House, that's good, and I know the owners there. But Tokyo's so spread out and checkerboardy that it becomes a little difficult there, I think. But Osaka is, if you can get right a thing, because people ask, they say, well, your customer base, it's about half and half.
The other question I was going to have, I mean, because that actually, it's funny you said that, because I hadn't really seen any Louisiana or Cajun-Creole restaurants in Tokyo. And when I lived there, I never actually found any. But when I was living in Fukushima in Iwaki, there actually was a place called Louisiana.
Oh, wow.
Bar Louisiana. I didn't know about it until my last year, like my third year. I stumbled across it one night, and it was like the second floor of this building with like a little tiny sign with like katakana, like Louisiana in like katakana. So I had no idea I was there. It was like one of those hole in the wall places. You go in there, and the guy apparently had studied like Louisiana. He came to New Orleans and studied under a chef here for I don't know how long. I can't remember what he said, but his whole restaurant was like covered in like American license plates. So it wasn't a full on like Louisiana theme place, but yeah, but it had like jazz, like kind of things. Like he had little statues and like street signs, kind of similar to what we have in New Orleans, and those kind of that style. You can kind of feel it when you go in there. You're playing jazz music on the on the background. So it's crazy. If you could find those places, it's great, but they're so hard to find.
So hard.
Sometimes, like they're really just kind of nook and cranny sometimes.
Right. There was a place here where this one guy he served crawfish. It was really funny because they were 5 crawfish for $5. It's like, okay, right.
Whoa, wait, what? 5 for $5?
Yeah, and they were cold.
Wait. Ugh.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Well, crawfish aren't really a delicacy, and they're a plaything,
which is
in Japan.
Funny because they have the land and the climate, especially like Osaka and further south, to really raise them. They have all these abandoned rice fields, and I'm like, this is perfect for crawfish. I wish I had the capital to have a crawfish farm, because if I did, I'd have a crawfish farm. But my wife said something interesting. Apparently, the crawfish they have here now is the crawfish from Louisiana, which was brought here and they took over. And apparently, she said with her parents, after the war, they thought it was poor people's food because people would go and catch them and eat them, right? And, food was scarce and whatever. So there was, at one point, a stigma. And so now crawfish are like the 3rd grade class pet.
Yeah, exactly. That's
you were a jet,
I remember doing my introductions on my first day and saying like, so I'm from Louisiana and New Orleans, and we love to eat crawfish. I show a picture, and they're like, "What?
Yeah,
you eat them?"
Right.
Like, and that's like
that thing out in the tank on the 2nd floor. Right. Yeah, right.
And if they only knew how much we spend on a sack of boiled crawfish,
right,
they would be astounded.
Astounded.
Yeah.
astounded.
Especially during Lenten season. Oh, that's like
Oh,
big business
Oh yeah,
there.
this is peak.
I
Yep.
miss
This is peak right
crawfish
now.
so much. People say, "Why don't you serve crawfish?" I go, "Because it's too expensive.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. I'm not. Yeah, right. I
You gotta
can't.
get some third graders to wrangle some up for you.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. It's just crazy.
So
Yes.
yeah, the other question I was kind of getting into is like getting to that point where you opened your restaurant.
Right.
You know, as a foreigner, I mean, opening a restaurant in any country is a massive undertaking. Like
Yeah.
getting all the paperwork done and the red tape and all that stuff. But being a foreigner and doing that in Japan is even more so. And it sounded like you had some guidance from your friend who was a chef.
Yes.
That may have had some kind of exposure to what to do, what not to do.
Absolutely. Yes.
To kind of point you in the right direction, which is great. I mean, having that kind of resource is absolutely important. But were there any other roadblocks that you hit when you were starting your business?
Okay. So straight up, I'm lucky. My wife is a lawyer. So
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So the paperwork, like, yeah, I'm not going to pretend like I slogged through paperwork because I didn't. She slogged through paperwork. And right. But even her being a lawyer with that kind of a status here, it wasn't as difficult as I would imagine it would be for someone who is untutored and maybe has a partner that might be Japanese but is unaware of how that works.
not used to the rigmarole of all the legalese that goes behind signing up for a business license.
Right. So
yeah.
But I think so I'm not going to pretend that part was hard. But just even getting ingredients is sometimes so, and now with COVID. So yeah, I'll go to the store to get, the sausages that I used for my gumbo and my jambalaya, it was available at one store until a year ago.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I went into the store and I just stared in the and I tried to make it appear. And it didn't appear. Like, come on. You're there somewhere, right? No. So there comes a fair amount of wiggle. And if I have to wiggle too much, I just won't make it. Kind of like crawfish and, some
So
other
you
things.
try to keep the ingredients within Japan. You don't try to go get from overseas or anything.
No, that's just too expensive. The only thing
Gotcha.
I ask people to send me, anybody who's listening, send me Tony's. Tony's. So I put Tony's on my fries. I don't use it to cook because there's too much salt and I can't control the salt as a chef. You just like, no, I got to control the salt. So I have my own mixes for that. But with Tony's, I put it on the fries and I put it on some of the fried food that comes out of the fryer. That's not highly seasoned. So I'm like, okay, well, yeah, Tony's. And yeah, so I say that. And believe it or not, I serve Sazeracs and Pecho bitters, unavailable. Send Pecho bitters. Right. I tried to buy Pecho bitters here. It was like, I said, well, no, I'm not paying $150 for a bottle of Pechos. I don't want the one from the museum. I just need it to make a drink. Right. It's crazy. So those are the only two things that I necessarily ask people to send because I don't use those in a quantity that would need constant refilling. But everything else, Jen, what you were saying is I try to keep it here in Japan.
And so you what would you say is probably like your hardest dish to try to replicate that's from New Orleans because of your stunt with, your ingredients being strictly from Japan?
So I did Oysters Rockefeller for a while. Although interestingly enough, finding celery leaves here is easy. I was like, wow, this is crazy. But instead of saying one dish, I'll list an ingredient. And Doug will understand this. Green peppers.
Really?
Lord have mercy. Green peppers here are tiny and small and full of seeds.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, could you just
By
let
the time
them...
you cut them out,
oh my God,
you just got like,
right.
It's like this much green pepper.
Yeah. And it's...
you got to stretch it out.
And it's part of the Trinity. So I have to buy them because, I mean, if I cook without them, then I'm just not doing it right. So, yeah. But it's just, it frustrates me to no end. That does. Here I go. I think, I have like, 4 bags of green peppers and they're little, and it's just I got to cut and seed them, and oh God, right. Where I could use 2 of them in a batch of jambalaya or gumbo, I have to use 12, 15. Right.
Dang.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
they're like half size, I feel like,
not
of
even
what
half.
at least. Yeah.
Not even
Like
half.
maybe more. Maybe
It's
like
1/3.
3 and 1.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's 1/3. It's just I don't want to say that. Like I don't really, it is. It just is.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, like, we were talking about, you mentioned the Holy Trinity.
Yes.
And we do have a lot of listeners that are from New Orleans, but we also have a lot of listeners that are, we kind of have like an international base and a local base,
Mhm.
which is great. But maybe some of this they're not as familiar with. So I kind of wanted to take a step back. And when you mentioned Holy Trinity, kind of, or not Holy, yeah, but like
Right.
maybe mention like kind of what that is. And, what is the Holy Trinity when it comes to like Creole and Cajun food? And then
Sure.
also, what's the difference between Cajun and Creole?
Good question. So the Trinity is onions and green pepper and celery. So it is much along the lines of what the French call a mirepoix, but the mirepoix has carrots instead of green peppers. And a sofrito would have tomatoes instead of, well, green peppers. Right. So the Trinity is just a riff on that. And, it's a base, it's a flavor base. And it just goes into my dirty rice and jambalaya and gumbo and a lot of those dishes that are iconic.
Yeah.
So, Cajun food is more rustic, mostly one pot kind of meals, where Creole food tends to be more urbane. I hesitate to say sophisticated because I think that Cajun food is sophisticated because everybody thinks that Cajun food is just spicy. But in many cases,
Yeah.
it's just not always just like that. It might be more robust, and maybe not as, I even refined is a word that I hesitate to use, but maybe a little more delicate on the tongue in some cases. But and maybe avails itself of more ingredients because Creole food was more cityfied. It was like, and all the ships came into New Orleans because of the port. So jambalaya itself is probably an outgrowth of paella. But
Yeah.
even people who were rich at the time were like, I don't saffron, no, I can't. That's expensive. There were wooden ships, yeah, like no, I can't afford to bring that here, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they used tomatoes instead of saffron, and that's probably how that happened. But I do have Creole and Cajun things. More Creole than Cajun, but for instance, but dirty rice is a Cajun dish. So, I have dirty rice here. And I don't use the long grain rice because it's expensive here. They refuse. It's almost embarrassing. And I won't use basmati rice because it's the flavor profile throws it off. And I love Indian food. In fact, I think that the spirit of Indian food is a lot like the spirit of New Orleans food, where you have a lot of ingredients that make this interesting and unique, these interesting and unique dishes.
I've never thought of it that way before.
Yeah, neither have I, but I
'Cause
see it.
It's
I see
Yeah.
it.
yeah, you could totally see it once you say that. Like I could totally see the parallels.
Right. You're just like, no, it doesn't taste like New Orleans, but it would feel like, right.
Yeah.
I was like, why do I like Indian food so much? Right. I moved to New York. Right. Yeah. This
Yeah.
is great. All of these different spices and all this wonderful stuff. Why wouldn't anybody do this? And I went, oh, right. And then it hit me. I was like, okay, so right.
Well, speaking of all the food that you make for your restaurant, a lot of people here in New Orleans, I feel like it's very much a city that, it's passed down from generations to generations, recipes and stuff like that. My husband is a good example. He learned from like his great grandparents and his mom. So what is where did you learn to cook all this food? And, are any of the dishes that you serve on your menu from like a family recipe?
Well, yes. So my gumbo is actually based on my grandma Rose's recipe. She didn't put chicken in her gumbo, but I like it. It gives my gumbo a little more body, and I like that. And I called her when I moved to New York the second time. to actually work, because the first time I went there for graduate school. So the second time I called her, and this is way before her, she got, she passed away. And, so it wasn't dramatic like that. And I said, Grandma Rose, I need to know about this. And she told me, because my mom was also a good cook, but my mom didn't make gumbo. My grandma did. My mom made some other stuff. She made the fancy stuff. So my grandma told me, and I remember she told me with my okra gumbo, she says, I'll never forget it, and you'll understand when I say it. She said, "Now, baby, make sure that you cook your okra real good, baby, because if you don't cook it good, you won't have gumbo. You'll have slop."
So true. So true.
Right. Yep. Yeah, nobody wants slimy gumbo. Right. Nobody.
No.
Right. And I said, okay, I get it. Right. But she was very direct and very honest and very sweet about that. But I was like, I get it.
She's probably like, don't butcher my gumbo.
Don't serve anybody.
This is my reputation.
Oh, snotty gumbo. Right. Yeah. So I remember that. And I added a little bit of chicken because I liked it. It gave it a little body.
I like chicken and gumbo. Nothing's wrong with that.
No, not at all. But some people go a little overboard. And I'm like, all right.
Do you put anything else outside of just like when with your grandmother's recipe? Was there anything else in there like shrimp or sausage?
Shrimp, sausage, crab.
Ooh, I love crab.
Okay. Oh yeah. So all of that goes in. All
Nice.
of that goes in here.
What do you do for sausage in Japan?
Okay, so
is this unless it's top secret and you can't tell us, then I get it.
Ooh, Jesus Lord.
But sausage is tough.
Yes.
Sausage is tough.
It is. It's weird because this is a country that has the best hot dogs, and then after that, sausage blows. So I used to get this kind of smoked sausage at the grocery that I told you earlier. And then all of a sudden, maybe 6 months into COVID, it just didn't appear anymore. And it was the only place I could get it. I even had my wife call the company and they go, "Oh no, we're not doing that anymore." You gotta be kidding me. So I had to find another sausage that was spicy, but where can I get the smoke? And finally it hit me. Somehow in a few places I can get these smoked duck breasts. So I would use those to get just a little touch of smoke in the gumbo that the sausage would normally provide.
Hey, good improvise.
Yeah.
Oh, it's always improvisation here, right?
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
God,
well, I mean, that's why I asked, because I remember going when I was trying to make what was I trying to make? I don't even know. Red beans and rice.
Ooh, good luck with that.
I mean, I would cheat. I would bring the ready, like you drop it in a boiling pot and it's done. I cheated, totally cheated. But like I wanted to add sausage to it or something, and I'd have to go to the supermarket in my town in Iwaki. That is a sizable supermarket, but
nope.
It doesn't have an international section by any means
at all.
So the sausage there would look like basically like beef jerky.
Yeah,
like little skinny,
fat sausages. They're like,
this'll do.
Right. Yeah, you have to deal with that sometimes. And these sausages that I used to get were fat, but they were short. But I would slice them up anyway, so it didn't make that much of a difference. But when those stopped happening, I was like, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me!" So I spent 2 days curled up in a ball.
I feel like that's the biggest roadblock you have, right? It's just ingredients, like finding those.
It's
finding
hard.
the right stuff, and then just the supply chain of some of the things that you're getting, especially with COVID. I mean, COVID out, but pre-COVID probably wasn't as big of a deal, but now especially with Japan kind of closing off to the rest of the world in some regards, things coming in isn't happening as much as it used to. So
it's like, what do you mean you don't have this? I have money. Can I give you money? Right. For this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just, it's challenging. Yeah. It's even, so what I do is, my jambalaya and dirty rice they don't use long grain rice, but I use a trick from that Mexican rice uses you. So I fry the raw rice in oil, or
Okay.
fat, like I might cook it off and like, use the fat and that will help keep the grains separate as they cook. It's still more kind of a stuffing, but not so fluffy that, it still tastes like rice.
Yeah.
Even my Japanese customers are like, oh, this isn't like, I know it's not like your rice, not at all. Right. But
No rice cooker involved.
no rice cooker. Yeah, right. Then I have a rice cooker, but that's just for, gumbo and shrimp Creole and, those kinds of things. Yeah, you find yourself trying to get inventive, so that you can serve the thing that's most authentic or just straight up authentic. Right.
Yeah.
Although I will say what surprised me was the availability of okra here. But Doug, they like slimy things here, like natto.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm like, yeah,
Never.
natto,
Right?
get
Yes,
out of here.
they do.
I'm like, what's
Yeah, I was surprised by that too. Like I didn't realize okra, and I think I think matsue. I could be completely off base here, but I want to say that's like one of their biggest or one of the areas in Japan that has a lot of okra is over there. And I was shocked. I had no idea that okra is a thing.
It is right, and they serve it typical Japanese style, kind of room temperature and slimy with bonito on it. I'm like, no, that's not how you do this. Right. It's not how to do this. I am not eating that at all. My wife is like, she gets it. Yeah, she's been in New Orleans a few times, right? So yeah, she kind of understands. I'm like, I'm not eating that. That's just nasty.
That's wrong.
Right. I'm like, I don't want soy sauce on snot. No. Right. Everybody's going to somebody's house and they're like, oh, this okra's not good. It's all slimy and right.
Well, it comes back to the whole like you're eating like what you have you're predetermined, but like you're accustomed to okra in a New Orleans way.
Right.
Yes.
And then you're seeing okra. You're seeing okra in a non-New Orleans fashion, and you're like, "Oh my god, this is like what you were doing with the restaurants in New York, kind of the same thing."
Yeah,
like, you're equating it. And you're like, "This is not New Orleans standards by any means." I mean,
why would you do that?
The same thing. Yeah.
I don't know, why would you do that? It's funny.
It's a culture shock,
right? I'll tell you a quick funny story. So, I was still living in the States before I moved here, and a girlfriend at the time, she came to New Orleans with me, and she's Mexican. And so we had militon. We had the casserole, militon.
Yeah.
And she says, is this chayote? And I had lived in New York already. So yes, this is chayote. We call it militon. And she goes, I've just never had it like this. And I said, you mean like delicious? And she goes, yeah, we just cut it up and boil it. I'm like, why? It's just plain. Yeah. It absorbs all these wonderful flavors. It's got its own thing going on. But, by itself, it's okay, but not, spectacular. But we put it in a casserole and it's a touchdown.
Delicious.
Right.
Yeah, it's great.
And she's like, yeah, I don't understand. I'm like, well, don't worry. It's just New Orleans. We just make everything. Yeah, this is what we do.
We just throw shit together.
And it works.
Yeah. Does this work? Okay, good. So, because I have a crab meat au gratin, which, now I serve it over pasta because they cannot understand how to eat that with a spoon. Neither can anyone else in the United States. They're like, so I'm supposed to eat this cream and cheese and butter and crab meat thing and just put it in my mouth? I went, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't eat that every day, because you'll have a heart attack. Yeah. You'll have a big heart attack. So actually, I'm going to pub this book to your New Orleans listeners too, though. I think it's still in print. It's called Gumbo Tales.
Okay.
I think the author's name is Sarah. I've never heard her say her name, but Sarah Rowan, maybe. She's from Wisconsin. But the book, she wrote for Gambit for a while. So I like to give this book to people or recommend it because it's an outsider's view of someone who got introduced to New Orleans culture. And so it's literally all the freakouts I see from everybody that I brought to New Orleans. They go, I gotta. This is how you eat. This is really. Are we gonna eat vegetables ever? Right? It was right. And so she kind of walks through that kind of a thing, and I can feel like how other people feel when they go to New Orleans. Like, are we gonna eat vegetables? Oh yeah, they'll probably have ham and bacon in them, and yeah, whatever, right? But yeah, there's vegetables, right?
So that's actually a great point that I was going to bring up. I was like going to ask you, with your customer base, you had mentioned earlier that about half your customers are foreigners and half of them are Japanese, correct?
Yes.
Approximately, maybe not exactly half, but
Right.
you know, Cajun-Creole isn't a cuisine that's widely available around the world
Right.
in general too. So I'm sure that your food is a first time experience for a lot of people who eat it.
So many.
Yeah, like what is the reaction that you get? Like what is the standard reaction? And like what shocks people the most? Besides like maybe eating the crab au gratin with the spoon.
Right. Yeah. I served it that way for a little while and I'm like, okay, everybody's too freaked out. I got to put it over pasta. So everybody's like,
yeah.
And it's still really rich and yeah. But
yeah.
I think that most of them are surprised at how rich and varied it is. They don't necessarily make the Indian connection that we talked about earlier, but it's because Japan is a place where and I like it a lot, but not all the time. And it wasn't what I grew up with, but they're like one or two tastes that are executed really well. Like sushi. It's fresh. It's just barely seasoned. It's really, really good. The same with a lot of their food. And I get it and I like it. But so they're always amazed at the complexity. They taste it and they're like, but I can still taste it in my mouth, 10 seconds later.
Doing acrobatics, your tongue's going crazy.
Right.
Like you have so many sensations going on. Yeah.
Right. A lot of because I have this storefront, so people can see in, even though, technically I'm considered basement, but I'm really like almost the first floor because they can see in. And a lot of my customers are Japanese women who I've seen have dragged Japanese men in here. They're like, well, I want to eat here. This is different. I don't want to go to the izakaya and, right, where it's dark and and dank. I want to go here. It's different. And they try to figure out the menu. And I obviously I try to help, so. But they're always surprised at the complexity and a lot of them like gumbo. They're always surprised.
I could see that.
Yeah, they're always surprised. And they go, there's okra? And they go, okra is not a Japanese plant. I went, no, it's not. It's African. Yeah, it's African. They're like, it's African. I'm like, if you want a history lesson, I'll sit down. Right. So yeah, it's mostly people are surprised at like I said, the complexity and the uniqueness of it all. They're like, well, I've never had anything like this. But, most Americans that come here, most Westerners that come here are even, surprised. I lived all over the States and people were like, I don't understand this food. I'm like, it's fine. I'm used to that. Right? Yeah.
Does that keeps people coming back though, right? That uniqueness of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does it keep them
same
become
old,
like
same
lifelong?
old.
Right. They're like, I want
Yeah.
something different. I want something. I don't want, because you can get a hamburger here.
Yeah.
And you get good hamburgers and you get, McDonald's. You lived here. McDonald's. Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow. Right. It's 20.
Is there still a potato shortage?
Not with McDonald's, but with me. Like literally, I go to the restaurant supply store and I'm like, where the hell are the French fries? Like, and people say, well, you don't want to get fresh cut fries? I went, I have limited space because it's Japan. So there's limited space. I went, listen, you know what? This is the advice I give to people. So listen to CC. When you go to New Orleans, don't get French fries. Don't get a platter with French fries. You can get good French fries anywhere. I love New Orleans and the food is number one, but French fries, they just don't get that. Don't fill your stomach with French fries. Fill your stomach with fried shrimp. Fill your stomach with, oysters. Fill your stomach with, crab meat au gratin. Don't get French fries. So I don't worry about the French fries as much. But even, don't get me wrong, I season them with Tony. So, everybody's like, ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to get.
Always makes everything better.
I do that like at home, and if we ever make like just throw something in the oven,
Right.
I throw Tony's on everything.
Everything.
I'm like I throw on spaghetti and meat sauce.
Yep.
I'm like, let me throw a little Tony's on it, give a little flavor.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, I got a can of Tony's at home that I would not bring to the restaurant to use. And my wife was like, "You're out of Tony's." I'm like, "I don't care. I'm not getting rid of this.
Mine.
This is mine." Right. When I was a teacher in the States, some of my kids went to Tulane for college, and they'd come back, the next year, just visit the high school like a lot of kids do. And they would look at me and they would say two things. They would say, "CC, I understand you better, and I put Tony's on everything." Right? Yeah. Everything. I can put Tony there. You got Tony there. Everything. Like we order a pizza, Tony's. Right.
Tony's.
Right.
Yeah.
Why not?
So, and all the non-Louisianians or New Orleanians listening to this, Tony Sachery is like a seasoning. It's like you can get a low sodium version of it or whatever, but it's just like kind of a Cajun spice. It's the go-to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other off-brands like Slap Your Mama and I don't even know the other ones, but there are other ones out there.
Yes.
But Tony's is it's kind of like the Band-Aid of your adhesives, right?
Yeah.
It's the name.
Yeah. You just say Tony's. People are like, is it just called Tony's? Yeah, right.
Got to look for that green can.
Right.
Well, you were talking earlier about, your storefront, how you kind of consider it basement, but still people can look in and see.
Yes.
And I'm kind of curious as to, because Osaka is such like a foodie city. I run a study abroad program and we have a field trip in Osaka, and I always advertise Osaka as like the kitchen of Japan.
Yes.
So like, what was like your process for like picking out your restaurant's location? Because I'm sure, advertising your restaurant is pretty crucial in that area.
Yes.
Sometimes being different, it could be a good thing and a bad thing. So like, how was location like a big player in your business?
That is an excellent question. And it was one that I talked about last night with some of my staff, because the answer is when I moved here, I moved here and my wife to be at the time she said, "Okay, well, I live here," but I didn't know anything about Japan or Osaka. So we moved to this neighborhood, which is called Kitahorie. It's a nice neighborhood. It's kind of Tony a little bit, it used to be, it got a little gentrified at some point. So after trying to teach for a while, I got frustrated. I thought about doing this. And so this thing opened, and it was literally, it's across the street from where I used to live.
Oh.
Even now my commute is like 5 to 10 minute bicycle ride, and I act like a little boy when I have to ride home drunk. Right. I'm like, because I used to walk across the street. So yeah, I'm a little spoiled. But the neighborhood was nice, and it wasn't one of those Japanese neighborhoods that's super crowded with lots of people. That is literally 6 blocks away. Shinsaibashi is really big.
Oh, yeah, that's big.
You've heard of Shinsaibashi, yeah.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, right. And you wander there, and everybody's drunk, and nobody cars don't matter, right? And then there's Amemura, which is right next to that. And then I'm the next neighborhood to the west. But it's people walk here, but it's not like this is not a destination unless you want to go to a nicer kind of a restaurant. And they have nice ones in Shinsaibashi and Amemura, but this place opened up. It was a cafe. And I think the guy who opened it up was kind of just wanted to kind of cash in on the neighborhood, but he didn't have anything that was really worth. I never came here in 3 years, and I lived across the street. And he would cover up these beautiful windows that you saw earlier with a whiteboard, because in Japanese culture, many times you don't want people to look into the restaurant. You'll see that, if you think about it, you'll be like, oh yeah, I really couldn't see into a lot of these places. And I guess there are privacy issues or whatever, but I didn't care about that. I was like, these beautiful windows. So I said, well, this was the best place. The guy was leaving, and I just saw that we could maybe do something with this place, and being from New Orleans, maybe display a little bit, right?
Share the culture a little bit.
Right. Even right through the
Yeah.
window. And it's been helpful, and that's helped. But again, with Japan, it's always space issues. So, whew. I mean, literally, I have a stove with 3 burners, a fryer, an oven, a microwave, and a toaster oven, and a rice cooker. That's what I got.
Hey,
And
you work with what you can.
no, it's a proper restaurant style oven stove thing, right? It's stainless and whatever. But it's still like, I say, can I get 5 burners? And they're like, get rid of the fryer. I'm like, well, no, I can't get rid of the fryer. Get rid of the dishwasher.
That's crucial to New Orleans food is the fryer.
Right. I have boudin balls. I gotta fry them. Right. So I was like, okay, fine. This is what I got to work with. So you learn, right? But the location is, I think it's really good for me in that even though these types of neighborhoods kind of ride waves, at one point they had the bubble kind of burst here, and then like right after you left, probably, the economic bubble kind of burst a little bit, and it got slow here. Whereas in Shinsaibashi and all those other places, people kept going out to drink and eat there. But I mean, this neighborhood here is, I'm looking outside now, but other than the sushi shop across the street, I'm one of the oldest residents here now, and I've been open almost 10 years.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
So
that's so cool that it just happened to be like kind of like happenstance. Like it just happened to open up.
Right.
And you were right across the street, and things work like that. It just kind of plays out sometimes in your favor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a question for you, CC.
Sure.
With COVID being a thing, travel has been kind of difficult for everyone on both sides of the world. When was the last time you were able to travel back to New Orleans? And what part of New Orleans did you find yourself missing?
So I miss New Orleans. All of it.
Period.
All of it. Right. The first time I went to New Orleans with my wife, when we were dating, she saw the look on my face when the plane landed, and she saw me inhale. And she goes, it just smells like New Orleans. I go, yeah, I'm home. Right. So she doesn't want me. She's here, right? She's over there right now. She's like, shh, right. She's right over there, right. But so the last time I was home, it was 2018. And I was just there for a bit.
Not too far along.
Right before the craziness.
Yeah.
Which we didn't know. I didn't know it was coming. But
no one knew.
So 2017 came, and 2017 I came actually 3 times. The first one was a visit with my wife and my daughter, and it was actually fortuitous because it was a good visit. My father was in a nursing home, but it was a good visit. He was, doing well, and that was really good. And then later that year, he passed away. And then my mom passed away 3 months later. Geez. So I went back for 2 funerals in 2017. And and it was, I guess the best way to put it is it was a community thing because, my parents were really big in the community, and, we were, it was a thing. And so it was, comforting in that regard.
Yeah,
you got to be around people that
right,
that everyone loved them.
Although interestingly enough, at my mom's funeral, so I did the eulogy at my mom's funeral, and Dr. Michael White, he's a clarinetist.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
So he was one of my college professors, and he knew my family. And and John Boutte, he sang at my mom and dad's funeral, right? So we have all those connections. And so some of the Japanese people that live there now and have connections, and some of them that live here that have connections in New Orleans, they're like, "Oh, you know these people?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know all these people. Don't worry. Yeah, I know all these people, right?" But it was funny because there's a woman here who plays the clarinet and has played live music at Shot here. Because of course I'm from New Orleans, so I have live music, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I said, Mike, Dr. White, I said, Mike, do you know Mayu? He says, Mayu, she gets it. She plays a clarinet. I said, she plays things because she asked me if I knew Dr. White. I was like, yeah, I know Michael, right? Yeah. So that's always interesting to find those kind of connections.
Yes, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's small world.
I mean, if you go to Vaughn's and you see Miki Fuji, she's been in New Orleans for, I don't know, 30 years now. She comes here. When she comes here to visit her family, she's from Osaka. She comes here. She does shows here. And did you not know? I didn't know her in New Orleans, but I know her here. And then when my parents passed away, she came to visit, at the house. And then she saw my brother and she says, Chris? I'm like, he's my brother. Do you know why? He's my uncle. Right. Yeah. Crazy. But yeah, I love those kinds of connections.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so wonderful. Mm-hmm. So I got one more question for you.
Sure.
And then we probably need to wrap up. I don't want to keep you too much longer.
I want to talk all day. I don't care. I'm from New Orleans.
I know. But do you find yourself waking up at 3 a.m. to watch Saints games live?
All the time.
Do you like do you do the live games? Or do you,
I do it live.
Okay.
Yeah, I do it live.
Yeah. What a trooper.
When I was teaching, I couldn't do that. I tried sometimes, but I usually would have friends come over on Monday nights, and I had like the NFL. It's like League Pass and the archive games, and you would watch it without the commercials and stuff.
Right.
So I'd have friends come over on Monday night. And we'd have like a Monday night football thing.
Oh, okay.
So that was pretty cool. It gave us something to look forward to, but I had to like stay off the internet all day Monday to avoid spoilers. I tried to not find out.
Good luck with that.
Super Bowl. I managed to avoid Super Bowl.
Did you
spoilers.
really?
Yeah, we had a Super Bowl party at my friend's apartment, and needless to say, I called in sick to work the next day. I didn't go
right?
teach.
Yeah, I can't go.
My poor elementary school students, they were deprived of language lessons, but they probably wouldn't have wanted those language lessons anyway.
It's a Monday morning, they don't care. Right? They're like, yeah, can we just?
That was rough. But yeah, I wanted to check and see how you did it, because I know I tried to stay up, but it was tough. Especially when I had to work on those Monday mornings bright and early.
I can't say that I'm awake for them all now, especially this past season, because
yeah. Well, the good thing is, like, if you have a afternoon or evening game, which I feel like we're getting more of those lately.
Yeah,
you can wake up at 6
yes
instead, and then it's like an early morning instead of like a late night.
Yeah, my wife and daughter still think I'm crazy. Yeah, right. Yeah. What are you doing? Right. Stop screaming. Right.
All right, and last question for you.
Sure.
Last question. If you had a high profile customer coming in and you had to prepare one meal for them, what would that meal be?
Definitely gumbo. Because even one guy from New Orleans who came here, he says, like, how can you do this? I've been all over the States. It's just like, did you make a deal with the devil? I go, no, I know what it's supposed to taste like. So, right. So definitely the gumbo, shrimp Creole, which I've actually made in New Orleans, the one I make here. And people from New Orleans are like, damn, CC. I'm like, yeah, I'm good at this. Right.
I feel like those are very sophisticated dishes to present to people.
You have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's not, you can't just accidentally stumble across gumbo.
Yeah, look what I made. Right. So I don't have it anymore on the menu for now, but I made a roast beef like the one back home, but instead of just the loose roast beef, I would add a butter roux to the roast beef, because it did two things. Number one, it made it richer, because I would put it on a bun, because I can't get real French bread here, so I don't pretend. Pretend. I'm not pretending. No, and I'm not a baker. No, and I'm not getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to maybe sell some bread I'm going to make. Yeah, I do have some limits. But I would do that because it tastes like back home. Like, people are like, yeah, it tastes like back home. I make a muffalata because the baguettes I can get here or the same consistency as the bread back home. So it's not on the round bread because I'm not baking that, but it's the same consistency. So I make my own muff mix. Yeah, I have a muffalata here, so definitely, and
Okay.
people like that a lot here. I had to tweak it a little bit. So instead of using really great olives and just regular olive oil, I have to use so-so olives and extra virgin olive oil.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you do what you can.
You work with what you got.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like my dirty rice. I'm not going to give you my secret, but it does have the liver in it because, if it doesn't have liver in it, it's just rice dressing, which is good. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
I won't throw it in the garbage or nothing. Yeah. But, but yeah. Yeah. In fact, tonight we have an event and a couple of people are coming just to have the dirty rice.
Okay.
So
Cool.
that, and I serve bread pudding.
Ooh,
But
I love bread pudding.
Do you? Well, you should come
I do.
here because
I was just about to say that, I come to Japan usually every summer. And you know what? When we go on that Osaka field trip, I am going to make a stop next summer at your place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, the one bread pudding I don't do is the one with the raisins in it.
Good. Don't. I don't like raisins.
Like hot raisins. Who likes hot raisins? Right?
No one.
Hot
That's
raisins.
gross.
Right, yeah. Trail
Get
mix.
those raisins out of here.
Okay. In my oatmeal, I'll eat it. Hot raisins? Well, no. So I have about somewhere between 15 to 20 varieties. I make a red velvet bread pudding. Y'all hear that? You hear that?
What?
Yeah. In fact, I got to bake it later. Right. Yeah. So I make a red velvet bread pudding. I have a coconut one that's available now. I do strawberry versions of strawberry. I do strawberry ginger. I do blueberry. I do all of it. Anything but raisins. Anything but raisins.
Man, it is dinner time right now.
It is. Yes.
You
I
got
missed it.
me
Yeah,
on a dessert run. I am going to dessert.
I am
Somebody's going to have a sugar rush tonight.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Oh, that sounds so good. Well,
I can't wait to try it.
I know.
No,
and
y'all
like
have to
Jennifer
come.
said, yeah, we're
Definitely.
planning hopefully in July. We're planning on going over to Japan and potentially making a trip to Osaka.
Right.
So if we do,
Yes.
I'll be sending you an email or
please,
Instagram
or line. We're online now.
Yeah, that's true.
Jen,
I got
please
your line
add me online if you're online.
Awesome. Okay.
Yes, please do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like I said, in fact, if you check our Instagram, I do brunches occasionally, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And everything at the brunch is off menu. Even things that they taste like New Orleans, but you probably haven't had any of them because I just do it. So this last time I had a Creole pulled pork Benedict.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And I also had an eggplant. I don't know if you've ever had Creole eggplant, but I did a Creole eggplant, but I did it in a cake, like a crab cake, but eggplant cake.
Oh wow!
And I did a Benedict with that.
You're killing me.
Yeah, everybody's like, right. I'm like, even people in New Orleans are like, what? Yeah. But that's part of the creative thing. So I don't get bored because people ask me why I don't play Mardi Gras music all the time, and I went, no. Nobody wants to hear Mardi Gras music all year round.
Yeah, you want to get in August or even May or April.
No, you're like, okay, I'm done Mardi Gras Mambo next year. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. Right. And I'll be excited next year. But yeah, it's April. I'm done with that. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll Mardi Gras Mambo next January. Right. So, and I actually found a vegan baker here that makes an excellent king cake.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
I had king cake for the Mardi Gras party for the second year in a row.
Cool.
And believe it or not, you can use this on one of your other podcasts. When I was living in White Plains, New York, just north of New York City, I went to this Mexican kind of, little shop, bakery, and, they had food. I wanted some food. And I saw what looked like a king cake, but it was it was brown and maybe a little pink and not so colorful. And I just looked at it and I said, this looks like a king cake. And the woman behind the counter said, oh, there's a baby in there. And I went, oh,
it's a king
wow,
cake.
it's a king cake. Right. So the woman that does the baking here, she's Mexican. And I explained to her about the cake. And she goes, well, we have the same thing, kind of. It's just not so colorful. And I went, that's what I thought. Right. Yeah. This wasn't just a single bakery thing. It was right. So apparently in part of the culture of Mexico, they have the same kind of thing. And it's a Lent thing. Yeah. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Right. It was just pink and brown and, not exciting, but I'm like, still had a baby in it. Right.
Yeah.
It tastes good.
Yeah, right. Ring brioche with a baby in it. There we go. Right. Yeah. So, but yeah, you might be able to, I don't know, since after Katrina, there's been an uptick in, Mexican Creole.
Yeah.
Because, I explained to everybody here about the mix. We take everything that's good from everybody because it's good. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll describe my dishes a lot as French Creole or Spanish Creole, like with the shrimp Creole, or Italian Creole, which is muffalata.
Yeah.
Because when I lived in New York, these guys were like, muffalata, I don't know what a muffalata is. I'm like, Jesus. Give me that, and that. And I'll go home and make a muffalata. And you can pretend like it's not Italian, right? Yeah. So it's always interesting, those kinds of things that blend into New Orleans.
It's a gumbo pot of
a real gumbo pot
of cultures. Yeah.
Yes,
cultures. Yeah,
a real gumbo pot because New York was more like a salad bowl. It's not. They say New York's a melting pot. No, it's a salad bowl. Like everybody's next to one another, but they're still a little separate.
Yeah.
They don't blend so much. Whereas in New Orleans, they're like, we can do that. Because I did do a Vietnamese beef dish for a little while as a Viet Creole thing. Yeah, but no, I mean, like I said, some things sell and some things don't. So even if I like it, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to order.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But so I still have that I still have my recipe for that. So
that's cool.
I love that kind of a thing about New Orleans where they're just like, okay, what you got? All right, we're going to take it. Right. Love it.
Make it our own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we wrap up, I was going to say, did you want to let people know like your Instagram handle or your Twitter handle or any, like where they can find out information about your restaurant so that way they can follow you or, if they're in town, look for your shop.
So the best thing to do is when you're looking for Bistro New Orleans, which I would never call it in New Orleans, right? Look for Eat BNO.
Eat BNO.
Eat BNO, okay. Right. And that'll take you to the website or to Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. And you can find Bistro. I mean, you can always search Bistro New Orleans. And for those people in Japan who are unsure how to do that, if you type New Orleans, Osaka, I'll just pop up. Our website pops up right away. So
that's great.
Yeah, it is. I remember.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, it didn't take long. It was kind of weird. Yeah, I was like, wow, already? Right.
There you go.
But yeah, we're always available. Feel free to comment. I had a lovely young woman from Miami who posted the other day about feeling comfortable here. Like people come here and they forget they're in Japan until they walk back outside. But you're from New Orleans,
Yeah.
But you're
very
supposed to feel at home
and chilled. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're supposed to feel at home. It's just not it's not rigid here at all.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be,
that's what you bring into the table, right?
Yes.
The literal table and the figurative
Absolutely.
table.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Well, thank you again. So this is so much fun. I wish we can go on longer and longer.
Yeah, right.
But,
At some point, I think y'all have to either go home or.
Yeah, no. Well, like I said, I'm definitely, when I'm in Osaka next time, I'm coming by.
Same.
I'm trying out the red velvet bread pudding.
Absolutely,
so.
Yes. I hate saying goodbye, but I know everybody has stuff to do.
I know. It's where do you start, right?
I have a doctor's appointment. I'm like, boo, tell the doctor to wait. Right. That's not how it works, though, right? So,
but no, it was so much fun. And again, thanks again, CC, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jen.
And hopefully some of our listeners, when they're in Osaka too, they show up to your door and
I hope
get ready for some, Sazerac and gumbo.
Yeah, try that grandma's gumbo.
Yeah, Grandma Rose, baby, Grandma Rose.
Yeah.
Make sure it's not slimy, right?
No slimy gumbo. Right, exactly. Listen, you keep in touch, and you know what? If we can do this again, I'd love to talk to you all anytime.
Absolutely. It was fun. It was fun. And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning into our podcast. We hope you learned a lot about New Orleans style cuisine, opening a restaurant in Japan, and all that comes with running a restaurant in Japan. A special thank you to CC Haydel of Bistro New Orleans for coming on to the podcast to talk about his restaurant. If you haven't already, look him up on Google. Like he said, just search New Orleans, Osaka, and it should get you right there. Or check him out on social media by searching EATBNO. EATBNO. And next time you're in Japan and you're feeling a little bit homesick, don't hesitate to go out and find a restaurant that'll bring you the taste of home. Or if you're in Osaka, check out Bistro New Orleans and be welcomed as if you were at home. Have you ever been to Bistro New Orleans or any other foreign-owned restaurant in Japan? Share with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Krewe of Japan Podcast. That's @KREWEOFJAPAN PODCAST. That's Instagram. Krewe of Japan Podcast on Facebook and at KREWEOFJAPAN on Twitter. Krewe of Japan Podcast. While you're there, give us a follow, like, share, comment, tweet, whatever. Let us know how you're enjoying the podcast, or perhaps maybe you want to send us an email because you prefer private communication. Who doesn't like that, right? Send us an email at krewofjapanpodcast@gmail.com, KREWEOFJAPANPODCAST@gmail.com. And speaking of feedback, feel free, if you're enjoying the podcast and enjoying what you're listening to, leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast streaming app. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much to everyone here listening. Your support really means a lot to all of us here at Krewe of Japan. Until next time, see ya.